do you think that Kenya can truly achieve food security 100%? And not just Kenya really, but truly the African continent?
Yeah, thank you very much again. Well, I'll start with an African proverb which goes that one who causes others misfortune also teaches them wisdom. If you look at the cycle of drought, the length have actually reduced. If you look 2014, you look 2015, you look 2017, we're in 2019. So it means that the recurrence of these droughts are actually, the frequency has actually changed.
Right.
And the long distance issue that we used to think has now moved into the present. What is that telling us? It's telling us that then we cannot then use only reactionary measures. And if you take Kenya, for example, this is actually costing Kenya gross domestic product each and every year 2.8% of the GDP, and that equates to about $2 billion US. So this is an economic problem to the country. And if you look across the entire African continent, it's not just about Kenya. We're talking the Sahel that are suffering from the same episodes. So what then needs to be done, building on what the former minister have said, is we need to look at these from three perspectives. The first is you cannot address these challenges because these are climate change manifestations through drought or flood in a reactionary way. You must be able to address this within the national framework, which is, if you take into consideration, Kenya have signed up to the Paris Climate Change Agreement and have ratified this agreement. Kenya have signed up to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Kenya also have Vision 2030. Kenya also have the Big Four. You cannot address drought issues without actually premising this within this broader national framework and also the status tree signatories that Kenya have signed up to.
Right.
And so the first thing that needs to be done is that any action must be premised as a socio-economic opportunity. So if you take, for example, the 12 countries that are suffering from drought, last year other countries had surplus. And actually, the surplus that they had, most of these was being decayed. So if the government, which have an excellent policy in what is called feed-in tariff and energy, actually one of the best in the entire continent, if they can be able to decentralize solar dryers to the farmers that produce maize, they can be able to dry these and actually be able to supply these to other countries.
I mean, the solutions that you and Honorable Kipruto are tabling are very fantastic. They sound very good, but the problem is how we need now the implementation of it. And here's the thing, let me take us back to what one of the callers said. When Joshua called, he even talked about the floods that we're seeing in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. He said something very important. He said that those floods are exposing how Africa is unprepared when it comes to climate. Do you feel, as where you're sitting, do you feel as if African governments are working together to have solutions, to table homegrown solutions for climate change for African countries by African governments?
Absolutely. I think we need to appreciate progress. We're not starting from scratch. If you look at the ratification of the Paris Agreement, which is quite very simple, countries put together plans, and these plans were not coming from space. Kenya put together plans prioritizing clean energy and agriculture as the broader framework to be able to drive climate action to build resilience. And out of the 54 African countries, 50 of them have ratified this. What is that telling us? It means that they've seen the inherent opportunities in this Paris Climate Change Agreement. When it comes to implementation, there are countries that are making huge progress with Kenya inclusive. If you look, let me put it in perspective here. Kenya is the only country that have a constitution that have enshrined in Article 43, paragraph 1A and C, the right to food, the right to water, and also socio-economic opportunities. That means that Kenya understands that at least the right to food is actually the fundamental right that can actually be implemented. And if you look at the Big Four, so what needs to be done, which is a practical way to take forward, is that you can never ever do this in silos. Policy synchronization and policy harmonization must happen. If you take the Ministry of Agriculture, it is not the Ministry of Agriculture that will ensure that Kenya is actually food secure, and this cuts across the entire continent. Agriculture Ministry needs to work in synergy with Energy Ministry so that the feed-in tariff policy that helps to decentralize clean energy, solar dryers, can then reconcile with the climate-smart agricultural policy that Kenya have put in place to be able to drive agriculture. And at the same time, you need to take infrastructure policy and ICT policy to be able to reconcile so that at the grassroots level, roots construction can be connecting farms to markets. At the grassroots level, you could actually be decentralizing these solar dryers to where maize are produced, because I was speaking today, Kenya is losing in the form of post-harvest losses $500 million US each and every year. That's 50 billion Kenyan shillings. And if you take just tomatoes, Kenya is losing 2.4 billion Kenyan shillings. And in maize, Kenya is losing 29.6 billion Kenyan shillings. Why? Because of lack of value addition, and in this case, actually drying. If you can decentralize solar dryers to where this production happens, you will not only be creating opportunities, but you will actually be driving entrepreneurial ingenuity and creating enterprises. And you will take the livestock, which is quite very practical. Because of lack of forage or pasture, these animals are actually drying and having reduced in weight. It means that an animal that was fetching 3,000 Kenyan shillings might only fetch 500. But what if this was slaughtered up front and then a solar dryer was utilized to dry it? Actually, these pastoralists can actually be able then to preserve this and be able even to market this even after a month or even 2 months. And in that way, you'll be creating enterprises. So the solutions are actually there. What needs is to be able to ensure that we utilize coordinated approach. And I think just one last aspect on this aspect.
Very briefly.
Development, we do not do development for people. People do development for themselves. What the role that state and non-state actors play is to facilitate the process.
All right.
I need to digest that. I need to digest all that. That was very Governor, we'll need to take a break, but we'll come back.
You're coming back on that.
We'll come back and take feedback. But before we take a break, we're already getting so much